good day, good day, good day. Happy New Year, one and all. Welcome to Ideas That Matter, Part 2. Here we are in 2021. So, it's going to be a great day, and we're going to start off with none other than our always opening our great events with the brilliance of our djembe drummer, Garima Harvey. We've got a little clip to show you. So here, we're going to have Garima drum you in. Just a minute, we'll get there. Why is that? Oh, there we are. Share there, don't leave the meeting. Okay, let me know if this is working.
Welcome to TSI. Once again, we got people from all over the world. So together we are one, and we have the same thing in common. And guess what that is? The heartbeat, because the heartbeat is inside of us. We're born with it. So, you know, I'm going to play a little bit more. You know? I hope you enjoyed TSI. I hope you enjoyed the flavor and all the vibes. Welcome once again from the G-Man, Garima here, speaking. Please.
So Garima, and now live.
Yes, what's up, people? It is so great to see you. Happy New Year. How are y'all doing? And it is so great to be back, you know, and to join in with this awesome, you know, welcome to TSI, and let's have some fun, huh?
All right. Well, thanks, Garima. You have become the heart and soul of our institutes, and it's hard to imagine doing any of this without you. And it's always a great way to be drummed into something. And so speaking of drumming in, a second tradition we want to honor is land acknowledgement. And while this is more Canadian, it's also global, because Indigenous peoples the world over have been robbed of their land, their livelihood, their language, their culture. And if we're going to be healing as we move forward, part of our journey has to be acknowledge the truth. So personally, I'm a member of the Treaty 4 group in Canada. And you say, why would I be a member? Well, my grandparents took land from people. And actually, if you have to, on a treaty, there have to be two groups signing. And the issue is that one group signed in truth, and the other group, that's us, settlers, have buried that truth. And so we want to begin acknowledging that wherever we are on the planet, there are deep roots of connection to peoples who have come before us. And if we're ever going to get to reconciliation, which is a target for anybody and everybody who has ever been excluded, we have to begin not with reconciliation, but with conciliation. First of all, we have to talk to each other, which is the conciliation part. Then we can get to sorting out what reconciliation might look like. So we want to acknowledge that we all live on lands and with resources that have created our privilege for those of us who are part of that. And we want to begin a journey that will acknowledge that truth. And so with that, we're inviting Kirk Hinkleman to take us into a few moments of reflective thought. Kirk.
Well, thank you, Jack. Hello, everybody. It's good to see faces that I'm around a lot and faces I rarely see. It's wonderful. A silver lining really to the pandemic has been being in environments such as this, where we see people we only saw in certain places in the world once a year, maybe twice, and here we are consistently together. So that's wonderful. I'll get to the phone when I can get there. I'm going to lead us in a group meditation. And just before we get into that real quick, I just want to speak to the practice of meditation as it pertains to me personally. It's a daily morning practice. Organizationally, our organization LifeWorks, we subscribe to the notion that this practice is important for us to stay grounded in our day in and day out meetings with one another, meetings with collaborative agencies here locally, and in a bigger context, gatherings like this. I think there's some value in us collectively being still together, and so these practices are not just a one-off for a special event. They are something that we lean into consistently, and as it pertains to our threshold for change idea that we'll be sharing later today, we each and every time we convene, we take a moment at the beginning to ground ourselves together. So that I'd like to invite people to sort of get comfortable where you are, maybe shed your hands and your laps of anything that can distract you. Find yourself in as upright and comfortable a position as you possibly can, a position that honors and respects yourself as a dignified human being. Your feet resting flat on the floor or wherever they rest comfortably, hands flat, face down on your lap or palms up in your lap or wherever they may rest comfortably. And if you're willing, eyes closed. We want to take 3 big breaths together, and we'll do this all in unison. So our first one, big, in through the nose. Hold for a moment and exhaling out through our mouths. Second one, in through our noses. Holding at the top, exhaling through our mouths. Last big one together, in through our nose. And out through our mouths. It's normal for your thoughts to wander during a meditation practice. But just remember that our breath can act as an anchor. Just acknowledge a thought and move on. Always coming back to your breath, the gentle rise and fall in the chest, cool air in through the nostrils, the warm out. Just find your particular rhythm with your breath as we move forward. Welcome to the next round of Ideas That Matter series, hosted by the good people at Inclusion Press and the virtual Toronto Summer Institute. Born out of a call to keep us all connected in the midst of chaos, in the midst of uncertainty. We remember these feelings back in March of 2020, finding ourselves in a darkness behind a wall built so high, a shadow cast so infinite, hope fading, despair looming, lost as we reached out aimlessly, looking for some sense of direction. As we tried finding the handholds and footholds around the sense-making of our lives. An invitation to find the cracks was sent out by some of our guides present here today. these cracks providing light to get in. And as Jack Pierpoint said, it is up to us to act as wedges in these cracks, holding them open so the light can continue to shine, providing us with enough light to seek a path to move forward together. From this newly found sense of hope, with these cracks opening up, down and across the wall of darkness, bigger and bigger, we find ourselves intrigued by what we may see when we peek into them. John O'Brien once referred to the 5 valued experiences as windows into people's lives, a way of looking at someone's life through the lens of each experience. 8 months after the wall of darkness appeared in our lives, ideas that matter emerged, offering, through these larger cracks, large windows for us to look through, large enough to push open so we could not only see, we could hear, we could sense, we could feel. Stories, ideas, initiatives shining bright. We explored neighborhoods while leaning into our practices with Patty Scott and Neighbors Inc. We received a sobering and powerful dive into the real story of Black Americans via the Black American Tree Project with Danyetta Najoli and Frida Epham, a history lesson of truth in 2 hours, more honest than what we learned in years of quote unquote historical education in the standardized colonial schooling of our childhoods. Introduced to the gentle art of noticing with Heather Simmons, an invitation to slow down and find the richness and beauty in life's seemingly invisible and simple moments, happenings, and relationships. And finally, understanding the importance of holding true to the mission, even in the midst of living in this darkness, with Hope Dittmeyer and Mattingly Edge. Today, we find ourselves at 3 more windows. We'll see and hear Derona King holding the story. We'll see and hear California's Threshold for Change with sharing from Joe Donofrio, Beth Gallagher, and myself. And finally, we'll see and hear Diamond Harges teach us how to diversify our portfolios with intangible currencies. Here we are, 10 months into this life behind the wall, brighter every day as light beams through these cracks and windows. Growing more prevalent, growing bigger, these cracks and windows seem to be forming doors for us to walk through. And if it's not quite big enough, feel the weight of something in your hands now. It is the sledgehammer of our humanity. It is something when wielded from a place of love and compassion, when swung with an energy of social justice and inclusion for all people, can and will open the doors we need to step through the darkness and into the brightest of futures. Never forgetting where we came from, mindful of what we are going through, operating from where we want to go. We see ideas that matter. We sense lasting change. We feel real hope for our future. All right.
Thanks very much, Kirk. Really helpful, really grounding. Thank you for sharing the practice. We want to be able to connect each of us and our voices in another practice that we've used in these virtual events, and that's just to be able to check in with one another. And the check-in question that we'll use is going to be, why is it important for me to be here? What called me to be at this session? We're going to do that in a way that we're inviting people to appreciate that we're interdependent in the small groups we're in. There'll be groups of 4 or 5. We'll have 10 minutes to check in, and we'll invite people to use a practice of picking up a talking stick to share your reflection in response to those questions. And there's a minute or two apiece with that. 10 minutes, and we want to invite everyone to make sure that they make space for everyone to contribute. And please say your name before you speak, and we'll have a chance for everyone to be able to share, and you'll have just a minute warning about when that's going to be, when the breakout session is over. If you haven't experienced this breakout process before, it's a bit of a magical transformation. You really don't need to do anything. You can click join the room, but you will automatically be transported there and transported back. So please enjoy the time having a conversation. We've got 10 minutes to connect with one another and reflect about what called you to be here. And with that, I'll open the rooms. Thanks, everyone. As we heard Kirk mention, this is the second round of Ideas That Matter. The first round was in November on the 12th, and that idea was a mashup of something that's been a Summer Institute tradition when we've been live and in person, and that's been that we have had an opportunity for something we called a speakeasy. And it's been a chance for people to, kind of based on speed dating, just invite 8 or 9 people to share something that they care about and really matters to them, and everyone present organizes to hear them. And then there's also a tradition that's called a learning marketplace that's based in Harrison Owens Open Space, where people talk about and announce a topic they really care about gathering with some other people about. And what we've invented here is a mashup of that, where we made space in November for 4 different folks or teams of people to talk about an idea that mattered to them for about 7 minutes each. And then we broke into small breakout groups. And after that, there were learning marketplace sessions that were posted over the next month, and people have an opportunity to register for those. And today is round 2. And we are really delighted to have 3 sessions today. And the first of those sessions that we'll hear from is Derona King, who'll have anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes to talk to us about her session, which she's named Holding the Story. Derona, I think that you and I first met in Savannah, Georgia, at the launch of Waddy Welcome and the Beloved Community when the book launch happened years ago. And I was reminded yesterday, looking at an announcement about a reading of Waddy Welcome, of the fabulous photo of you and Mr. Waddy Welcome at that time, and your connection in relationship with him. And we so appreciate the years, which are now 14, that you've had as the head of Citizen Advocacy of Atlanta and Decalb. And your gifts are so many and so deeply appreciated. I've come to know you as a remarkable storyteller, a person of great grace and insight, elegant in the way that you see people and hold space, and you uplift people with your presence and your appreciation of our common humanity. And we are really pleased that you have agreed to hold this session, Holding the Story. And I want to turn it over to you now, and with deep appreciation.
Well, I must say, Linda, I wasn't prepared for that, but I am very humbled to be a part of this session. And I am so appreciative of the team there in Toronto, Jack, and all that you do to allow us to use our gifts and to bring them forth. So I'm really thankful for that. And Yes, a long, long time, a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, I knew a wonderful man named Waddy Welcome, and I didn't have these gray hairs going on then, but I'm here now. But that's part of the story that I'm going to tell today. So I am Derona King. I am so happy to see each and every one of you, to hear each and every one of you. I'm the Citizen Advocacy Coordinator in Atlanta and DeKalb County, and some of you may have recently heard about Atlanta and DeKalb County. It may ring a bell because since November 2nd to January 5th, we were the center of the political universe in the United States. And so I sit in DeKalb County, where much has gone on to impact our very small corner of the world, um, just most recently. Just delighted you're here. Uh, I tell citizen advocacy stories because I've been a part of citizen advocacy um, as the director for 14 years or so, but since 1993, as I began an associate coordinator. And for those of you who aren't familiar with citizen advocacy, it's a small idea. I think an idea in the human experience centered around what would be possible if ordinary people were given the opportunity to align themselves in a personal way with someone who happened to have a developmental disability. And so people much smarter than me, some that you may know, uh, developed a very intentional way to make that happen. And it's called citizen advocacy. And I have the privilege of meeting people whose lives are often at risk of abuse or neglect, very often socially isolated, get to know them well enough that I can share some of their story with the intention of going into the wider community to find an individual, one person, to come alongside of them to be what we call a citizen advocate. And we think about the need of personal relationship as important, if not more important, as paid services in the lives of a person. And we think about people over the long haul as a critical point of relationship and how things can change in a person's life, but also in community. Because I've been doing this and have developed these gray hairs over time, I've had some opportunity to think about what is even happening in myself personally and the impact. And so what I'm going to share briefly with you today is a story, one of many that I hold dear, having now citizen advocacy being 40 years plus in Georgia. We've got some long stories, but what I'm noticing just as I've gotten older, people in relationship have gotten older and have shared lives sometimes for a lifetime. And some of what that means is that these people have gone on, but their stories, even though they're not here, their stories have to live. And I hold a really unique position to have been a small piece of some stories that I hold in my heart. And I want to share them with you. And so today I'm going to share a story about a relationship that was created, two people brought together, I think 13 years before I was even a part of citizen advocacy. And this is a story of Doug and Joanne. Doug and Joanne were matched in a citizen advocacy relationship in 1980. So by the time I entered the story, they've had they've developed a real relationship. But I want to introduce you to who Doug and Joanne, who they are. Joanne was a woman who was often homeless. She had an intellectual disability. She was frequently harmed on the street. She received Social Security benefits to live. Often those funds were stolen from her by the time she could cash her check, if not by someone on the street, by the people who were paid to care for her in the group home. And she was often, she would pay her rent, and then the landlord would say, no, you haven't given me any money, I'm going to put you out. And that happened several times in Joanne's life. And so she came to the attention of the then, which was one of the original coordinators in the Atlanta program, the attention as someone who might benefit from having a citizen advocate. And the coordinator got to know her and pinpointed the role that really needed to be played in Joanne's life at that time was somebody who knew how to handle financial resources, who had great credibility, who could walk into a room and people would notice, who would be there to protect Joanne's Social Security benefit. And so a gentleman named Doug McKay was recruited. At the time, Doug was an executive vice president of what was then SunTrust Bank, seated in downtown Atlanta. It was literally a glass tower, and he sat at the top of that tower. Joanne lived in a group home very near that glass tower, but their world was a light years apart. And I really believe without the work of citizen advocacy, there was very little chance that these two people would have ever gotten to know one another. There would have been very little chance that Doug would have seen this woman whom he came to be friends with. Doug was a striking man. He was an All-American athlete at his private school in Atlanta. He went to the Wright College. He had a Wright Dunwoody address in Atlanta. He attended the Wright First Church in Atlanta, and everything about him would point to a different trajectory. But he was invited to get to know a woman whose life was very different, Joanne, and his role was to be her representative payee. And a representative payee is actually a legal process of taking responsibility for someone's money and making sure that they have what they need. And in Doug's mind, how hard could that be? He could be her Joanne's rep payee. And so what he embarked on was once a month, he would go to Joanne's group home and he would pay her rent and give her the remaining money so that she could live on. And it was very practical and functional for a while. And he did that for once a month. And then it turned out he started visiting twice a month. And on those visits, he and Joanne began to get to know one another. And by the time I entered into the picture in 1993, Doug was anxiously throughout the week waiting for Fridays when he would leave his office at 4:00, unbutton his Brooks Brothers shirt and tie with his Navy suit over his shoulder to get to Joanne's home. And they would sit on the porch. And he would tell me, she listens better than anybody that I've ever known. And I can't wait to get to Joanne's on Friday before I even get home so that I can tell her about the things that were happening at work. And Doug found this as a point of decompression, and they got to know each other so well. What was then his young son, Frank, was a topic of their conversation. Doug's wife, Cookie, was a topic of their conversation. And Joanne loved this. She had literally no family and she was alone. And the highlight of both of their weeks was Friday afternoon in Atlanta, sitting on the stoop, enjoying both a cigarette and a Coca-Cola together. And they both loved this. Doug protected her, and her life changed. Well, as things happened, Joanne got ill, spent her last few months in a rehabilitation center, in a nursing facility, and she died. And it is the practice in the county that I live in that if someone doesn't have family and resources, they're considered indigent when they die. And when you're indigent in DeKalb County, you're buried on county property. And in DeKalb County, Georgia, the property is that behind the DeKalb County landfill. Now, this was shocking for Doug McKay to learn. It's shocking for most people to learn. And the one thing that he knew could not happen was that his friend Joanne would not be buried in the back of the landfill. And I can remember the care that he took of picking out her urn, and the care that he took of preparing a memorial service, and the care that he took for an invitation for a woman who had nobody else but he and his family and the people he had introduced themselves to. this was one of the first relationships as I became a citizen advocacy coordinator that I met, and it impacted me greatly. And even after Joanne's death, Doug continued to tell her story, and he and I developed a relationship. And I hadn't heard from Doug for several months. We usually only got together maybe twice a year. And this summer, I was sitting on my porch because it's a pandemic and working, and I saw his number come over my phone, and I happily answered the phone. And the call was from Doug's wife, Cookie. And she said, Derona, I have something to tell you. And she said, he's gone. Doug is gone. And it was a hard call for her, because I was amongst even the family members that were being called. And she shared with me, Doug's heart was bad. He went to the emergency room. They told him that he didn't have long to live. And he said, well, then call my wife and I'm going home. He called Cookie, and on the car ride home, he held Cookie's hand and he said, because of you and Frank and Joanne, I've had a wonderful life. And Doug McKay died on the way home in the car to see his wife, to be with his wife. And I tell you that story not because I want you to be sad. I tell you that story because, particularly in the world of human services, people come and go, and there are connections and there are stories. And when people go, the story goes. But there's so much more to learn from the relationship that Doug and Cookie had, and Doug and Cookie and Joanne had, that lives on, that creates possibility, that creates hope. And as I hold these stories, I hold them to honor Doug and Joanne, but I hold them to honor what can happen in our community when people who are thought to be so different, when people are thought to be people who would never meet, actually come together and create something beautiful. And that's the legacy that I believe of citizen advocacy. And that's what I want to continue to share with people. And I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Derona.
Thank you. Well, and we have more. That was just a start. So our next team is, the topic is hosts, Threhold for Change. And it's Beth Gallagher, Kirk Hinkleman, and Joe Donofrio. And although they are longstanding friends, I think what today we need to know about is that they are a community of allies who are exploring the inner workings of our systems. And they're trying to reframe what's really important so we aren't trapped and actually build a future with the resources that we are, not dependent on all the other systems out there, but dependent on the resources that we are. So Beth is the, founded LifeWorks, I think back in 2004, and Kirk joined her in 2007, and they are a remarkable leadership team there. And they have been supporting people to have full lives against all the odds. And there are many remarkable stories. They wrote one book about it, Intentional Teaming, Shifting Organizational Culture. And I think if you wanted to summarize that, it would be what more is possible. And they keep on answering that without relentlessly. So one of Beth's statements is, my hope for LifeWorks is that we can team with people to achieve unique, customized, and fully realized lives. We want to do this one person at a time in a way that makes particular sense to that person. And Kirk's been on that same journey. They've been doing that together, and as you know, he's a person with an incredible skill in reflections. But Kirk also wrote, "We need to shatter the walls of our culture and society and create that prevent us from making simple human connections with each other in community and in neighborhoods. Love should drive the path we walk. We're all human, and thus all deserve love, dignity, and respect." Joe Donofrio is the founder of Choices, which is metaphorically down the street in California, and they have been collaborating together for decades. But Joe has been teaching and training and supporting this for ages. And this Threhold for Change is a new collaboration between the three of them to mobilize and energize teams to find the cracks and their commitments to change by discovering their own capacities and gifts. And the capacities of the gifts of those people around us. So the next session is Beth and Kirk and Joe. Welcome.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Joe Donofrio. I'm one of the trio that started this idea, and I'm going first. So we'll each take a little bit of sharing to set the context for our later 20 minutes that we have. So the way Kirk, Beth, and I have always tried to find ways to connect with one another. We seem to be kindred spirits in relationship to how we see the world, how we see the work that we do. When the pandemic hit in around about April, a month in or so, there was a bit of discontent that was happening, obviously in the world, but also just within the work that we do. And we, hit the ground running and did what we needed to do. And obviously discontent sort of leads to some change. When you're not happy and you're not pleased about how things are going, you either shut down or you kind of figure out how to become allies with other people and figure out some ways to figure stuff out. And the system, in the sense, if many of you remember, for us in California, where we were kind of on our own, supporting people in the community, living in their own homes, doing their own thing, and there was not a lot of help in the early month or so or beyond in terms of figuring out how to get supplies or what have you. That discontent sort of led me to reach out to Beth and Kirk and sheepishly send an email saying, "Hey, I think it's our time to step into that idea of we're doing something." Didn't know what that was going to be, had no idea, but I knew that we needed to work together and try to figure out what that was. So from 4/17 is about the time I sent an email to about 5/5, May 5th, 2020. We birthed an invitation that started called Threhold for Change. And what was ironic about it is that when we started the call, we just all said we're in. We didn't know what we were doing, and we landed a colleague of mine, a friend that I met through the Center for Purposeful Leadership. Art of Convening group. His name is Terry Chapman. He had a video that he put out, and that video is kind of what landed for us in terms of what we needed to do with each other. It was 7 minutes or less, and I sent it to both of Beth and Kirk, and it was like that set the tone of how we were going to create the world. And actually, in that video, turned out to be the name Threhold for Change, because we talked about thresholds. The video is about reaction, and that we're hardwired for reaction instead of and so how do we work through that? How do we respond differently, and how do we lay and create the foundation for us to be able to think through together how we should be together and what we should do. And so with that video, we sort of created an invitation, and we started on the journey. And so I'm going to pass it over to Beth, and she will share a little bit more, and then Kirk will finish us up. So go ahead, Beth.
So prior to Joe connecting with Kirk and I, in the very beginning of the pandemic, I was immersed in meeting after meeting, handfuls of meetings with leaders from around the state of California, with groups that I had already been associated with because I was on boards of directors around the state, and just because I'm the CEO of LifeWorks or whatever, and called into these meetings and was, panicked a little bit and was having a hard time figuring out how to move forward running LifeWorks, and was in meeting after meeting, like every day for 5 to 8 hours on Zoom. First of all, trying to get familiar in Zoom for 8 hours was really a hard stretch. And then in these meetings, coming out of meetings after a full day and not having an answer to any questions, and after day after day after day, and this went on for weeks. And by the time Joe called, I was like, oh my God, yes, please, we need to do something, because I had been just inundated with like notes, piles of notes of questions that not one person could get to the answer by the end of the meeting. So, and then we get to the next meeting, the same people would be in the meeting. We bring up the same question, nobody would fodder an answer, and we spin. So it wasn't just CEOs in the meeting, it was people from the state of California, it was the Department of Developmental Services, it was, so a lot of people just spinning, and people were triggering the spin, and nobody was coming up with any answers. And so it seemed like the video that Joe shared with us provided just a place of peace and calmness. And it was like, oh, wow, that feels like the exact platform from which we need to move from. So it was like, there was no other answer than yes, and let's do this. Like, we need to figure out how we can, dare to lead. We need to, move forward, gather people, all people, not just like-minded people, but people that are in particularly not like-minded, people that don't agree with us, people that don't do the same business as us, people that are doing kind of services that we may not agree with. Let's kind of figure out how to move forward and gather everybody together. So we spent a lot of time pondering what it would look like if we actually got people together that were willing to listen, and listen very carefully, and how we would do that. And, we just really sunk into Theory U, and how we would do that is teach a little bit of Theory U and get people together and ask people that are willing to be change leaders, change makers, and really take a deep dive. So I'm going to pass this over to Kirk.
Okay, and I think we're at the end of our time, but this is just a tease real quick. I like to use imagery to help think through things. So we'll get more into this in the 20 minutes, but what Beth and Joe, I said everything that I would say about what we're doing. And for those of us on the call familiar with the Presence Against Student Theory and the work of Otto Scharmer as a framing of, as a social technology to look at change differently and operate from a different way than we're used to in our systems. We created this image, and for those of you not from the States, that's on the left, that is the state of California. And so I inverted the state on the other side so that, and the Theory U being a part of it, so that the state can maybe hopefully embody this framework moving forward. And that image in the middle is the state of California's flag that I've morphed into a stop sign because what the pandemic has done has forced us to stop. And so now we can be still with each other and have further conversations. So you'll see the COVID down at the bottom of the U in a positive connotation rather than a negative, because without the pandemic, we may never have stopped to look at things differently. And just before we leave, I'd just like to say that more than ever, I am so proud to be from the state of California. And we'll kick it back to our guides today, and we'll see you more in the 20-minute session.
Thanks, team. I realize that we're about to hear from Diamond, and then you're going to go into 3 groups. And I don't know how I would choose because I want to be in 3 places at once, but that's a characteristic that we managed to create at the Summer Institute, and so we want to continue that's a good dilemma. And so next we have Diamond Harges, and it's pretty hard to describe Diamond or his work. He is a chameleon in the sense that he keeps reinventing himself, and although he is black, he keeps changing the colors all around us. A couple of people have accused him of being the minister of propaganda, only this is propaganda for love and truth and kindness, and that's a pretty wonderful framing. He one of his early labels, he labeled himself the Roving Listener when he started out at Broadway United Metropolitan Church in Indianapolis, and one of his tasks there was he roamed the streets to gather gifts and capacities that no one else had seen, and watch and help them to bloom, help people to notice their own capacities. And he was like a giant can of fertilizer, just wandering down the street and helping people to notice their capacities. But one of the things he did was he did that by cultivating positive deviance. He didn't do it the way everybody else did. It was deviant ways, and he got coaching and collaborating with John McKnight and Peter Block and doing that, and they created the Learning Tree Network, and he infected the Kettering Foundation and helped them do a lot of rethinking, and they ended up calling him one of the best neighborhood organizers on the continent. Diamond's latest iteration, and he's going to keep on reinventing himself, but his latest new term is he's a social banker of intangible currencies. And if you think about that for a minute, it's about the currencies that we all have and can have and do have, but we don't acknowledge them. And so they don't depend on banks and foundations and philanthropists in any of the usual ways, because they are the things that underlie the very nature of our relationships with one another. They're about trust and love and kindness. And those all of us have access to infinitely if we choose to make that investment. So over to you, Diamond. Here comes our social banker of intangible currencies.
So I kind of giggled when you said the word fertilizer, which could be, but you know, a lot of things that people think of, I come up from a family that took waste and turned it back into the ecology so things can grow out of. So I appreciate, Jack, I always appreciate that. But the other thing is, Jack, you mentioned that all the people that helped bring me along the way, you know, you was one of those people. and there's a lot of people here that I do know. Jillian, Ann, helped me reinvent myself, Patty. So acknowledging that. And for those just people I'm like super happy to see. But for those who don't know me, I still hold the practice as the Roving Listener. And if you want to get more, I just, like my friend wrote a book, a little pamphlet, Having Nothing, Possessing Everything. We'll put it in a link later. You can hear more about that. I think I'm still the Roving Listener, and I do that work, which I found is important. And I went through other iterations. And another title I hold is The Cultivator of Joy. And you'll get to see that in the larger session, why that's true. But then I realized that, it is not like beautiful things don't go on. We just don't have a system to acknowledge the natural. And so I started thinking, what is it? Finding all the gifts and talents in my communities. And we went through celebrating people. And I started to think, I've been blessed to have, I can invite people from all spheres of the world. And so when my neighbors start throwing parties, I start inviting people to come. I would invite the CEO of the community foundation, or invite, the billionaire came over and hung out with us a few times. And I say that loosely. And that means anybody and everybody, president of a place. And we got somebody now in Biden's cabinet that's been in our sphere. So we're really well-connected group of people. And I had realized in the parties what would happen when these two worlds would get together. Two different economies would come together, right? Or be visible. One, the economy of manufacturing would be at the table. The institution, right? It is, we do things so that people can make a better us. And then we have people from our community is saying that we're building a community so that we can share what's best in life. So yeah, two economic spheres. And I started to rethink about some of those things that happen. And Patty and Dave were partly in the beginning of some of these conversations. I was been in it with Mike Mather, my friend, for years. And I remember us working on a current project we're working on at the beginning in New Jersey. And I remember being in the car and Dave and Patty talking about stuff. We were talking about how people think our work is soft because we're talking about love. We're talking about humanity. And there's numbers that are associated with that. And so we talked about, I started my journey following investments. And then I started thinking about an alternative to a return on investment. And I came up with this thing that I heard about return on community. And every state does that. Every municipal place base all their funding on a return, right? On something. And, in the state of Indiana, we got a $3 billion surplus. And yet there are more Black and brown babies dying almost all over the country. Out of all 50 states, we ranked in the top 3. And it's bad, right? So why is that? And so as we started to think about things, we started throwing these parties. And one of the things we started to ask one of my neighbors, Amanda, and business partners, count all the dollars that come in that are and the stories to go with it. And after about 5 years, there were so many different projects that came up out of these parties. And it wasn't us at Learning Tree doing this, right? It wasn't this group of people who was doing this. It was the people we connected. And so we would check that out. And after about 5 years, we had, in about 10 block radius, we had counted about $5, and that's a low ball number, $1 million that touched the hands of people in the 10 block radius. And I said, how is that happening? Most of us don't even make $23,000 a year per household. And so what I come up with, this idea that I'm still exploring, is called social banking. And it's talking about intangible currencies. So what allowed us to be in this place where we had power is, one, to know that we did have it. And so having 45 gardeners in the 4 block radius is powerful, right? Having tons of people who are in healthcare, having landowners, right? So we started bringing that up and creating our own portfolios. And then we started inviting people to invest in those. And so what's ended up happening to me is that the currencies like, I'm exploring currencies like trust, social capital, because that was the thing that my neighbors was missing, not skills. Story. My neighbor Wild Style has probably changed more policy in the state of Indiana around housing development than anybody. I mean, I'm going to put a thing. He wrote an article called "The Ethnic Cleansing of Black Indianapolis." Got the ear of the governor. There was a group of neighbors who just signed a contract with the governor to shift CARES Act money, you know, last year, meaning that money won't go to an institution. It would go to neighbors to pass out to neighbors. In the last year, we put about $10 million into people's hands across the city of Indianapolis. It was because of those currencies that we valued, right? And noticed that not only we were using it, but people who hold things against us, right? If we didn't own those currencies and state those currencies out loud, the people who use story currency well can shape images of us. So we invest a lot in that. We invest a lot in parties, right? Because we need people to trust each other. We invest a lot in asking people to give their relationships to someone that may better the lives of people. So that's what social banking and I'm exploring, and the social currencies.
Thank you, Diamond. Thank you, Kirk, Beth, and Joe, and Derona. I have now organized all of us into breakout groups. And we'll have the breakout groups be for 20 minutes, given the time. And you'll have an opportunity for a deeper exploration of the ideas that were shared. And you've got good leads for each of those. It was hard to choose, but basically it's organized now, and we'll let her go and see you back in 20 minutes. Just a reminder, I'm not looking at the chat bar now. Joe Donofrio, if you can turn on your record, if you haven't, that'd be great. And we'll go. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you back in 20 minutes. Really enjoy the deeper exploration, and we'll begin now.
That's me introducing myself, and I'm going to pass the talking stick just so everybody is in the room can introduce themselves. We'll start. Jen, you're on the screen next to me, so we'll start with you. Please unmic and introduce yourself, and we'll keep it going.
Hi, Derona. It's nice to see you again. I'm Jennifer Brown from New Jersey, and that's me. Was there anything you wanted to know, or just?
I just think it's a good idea just for us to know who's in the space.
Okay.
So we get to see your face up close and personal this way. Who's next, Steph?
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Jack, I think you have the stick.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jack Yates. I'm from Massachusetts, and my job has been for almost 50 years staff development in human service work. But my reason for being in this room, I'm kind of conscious of, is connection, at least a little bit on the side for a long time, with citizen advocacy.
Thanks, Jack, for being here. I appreciate it. Is it Danette?
Hi, Danite. Hello.
Danette.
Yeah, Danite, like tonight, but with a D. Yeah, my name is actually an Eritrean name. So my parents are from Eritrea, small country in East Africa, and it means peacemaker. So I really appreciate that gift of connection to my culture. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from the Treaty 13 territories, Ontario, Mississauga specifically. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. I think, Dave, I see you next. Hasbury.
Oh, okay. I'm Dave Hasbury, and I am living here in New Jersey. But tonight I grew up in Mississauga. So, just by the way, where are you in Mississauga?
Clarkson.
Ah, that's where I grew up. I went to Clarkson High School. Ah, yeah. I actually grew up there when it got named Mississauga, because it wasn't named until a little later. Anyway, that's beside the point, but very interesting. Nice to meet you, someone from my home territory. So, yeah,
See how
I'm here in New
important this
Jersey.
is?
Glad to be here. I'm a Derona fan, so happy to be here.
Thank you. Gail, you have the stick.
Sorry, I'm Gail Jacob, and I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm really happy to be here and hear more about what you're up to, Derona. We used to have citizen advocacy in Madison, but it's no longer here, and it hasn't been for years. So very missed, and really lovely to hear that it is still alive and well in different parts of the country.
Just done it, yeah. Hi, Derona. It's great to see you. And really lovely to be part of this group. So I'm Heather Simmons, and I'm phoning in from, or zooming in from Scotland, just outside of Glasgow. Jess, I think we're about 5 hours ahead of you. So Jess said I was calling in from the future. So, so it's looking pretty foggy and bleak from here, but never mind. I'm sure it'll get better. So I'm a Derona fan, and I was also really interested, because I'm very interested in stories and how we tell them. I was really interested to hear what you had to say, Derona, and I had not thought about legacy of stories, what happened to stories when someone passes, so I'm really excited about your idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, got the mic.
Hi. Yes, so we're 6 hours ahead here in Germany, so it's even future a bit further apart from. Yes, I'm calling you from Germany, and I just love to learn and listen, and glad to be in this group.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, so I'm Carol Blessing. I lead some work called citizen-centered leadership, and we're really working hard to advance stories in a way that really share and show impact in people's lives. And so I'm really very interested in learning more and hearing more from you. So I'll shut up so we can get to that sooner.
You're kind. Very good. But not before we meet Michael.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? It's great to see everybody. So I'm joining from Gananoque, Ontario, and I'm really excited to be in this room with other people, maybe to take a second to think about our relationship to one another, and maybe the gifts that we could share with one another. So I've found myself among friends here, maybe. So this is exciting.
Excellent. And I think, Nithya, you might be the last. Nope, there's no.
Yes. Hey, hello everyone. I'm Nithya. I'm from Westchester, Pennsylvania. Derona, thank you for sharing that powerful story and holding on to that story and passing it to people. It gives so much hope in these tough times to hear such stories. So I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Hi, Anne.
Hello, I'm Ann Mitchell. I'm in Indianapolis, and I love stories. I love citizen advocacy. I was part of a project in the 1980s in Michigan that then went somewhere else. I don't know where it went, but it went away. And so I just always love to hear, especially what's going on in Georgia. It seems like there's a lot of really, really cool stuff happening. So thank you, thank you.
And Sheldon, where did you come from?
I must have been off your screen because I had my
Oh my God.
my video off. So I'm Sheldon Schwiddick. I actually live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Been here for about 2 decades, although it's hard to believe that that's true at times. Originally from Canada, one of the people who's managed and been lucky enough to attend all of the Toronto Summer Institutes, and have been missing some of these events that have been going on, and am now, as I was just saying to Linda, making it a priority to be here with all of you, because it's the thing that lights me up and feeds me to keep doing the work I'm trying to do here as well. So.
Well, thank you everybody for joining in. You are so welcome, and I'm here to learn from you. This has just been
Derona, there's Lacey, I think, hasn't had the chance to.
Did I miss somebody? Please forgive me. Thank you.
Yeah, no trouble.
Thanks for that.
Yeah,
Thanks for that, David and Derona. Oni bojo kakinawea wasno deagone quendish nakas makwandodam milbe megwandida. So hello everybody. I introduced myself in my language. It's part of my reclamation and reconciliation process to reclaim that for myself and my family. My name is Lacey, and I'm a Anishinaabe woman living pretty far from home out on Vancouver Island these days, and really grateful to land into this conversation with you all and think about how our bridge building work that we do over at 4Rs can be more inclusive, and who's missing from our table, and what powers of advocacy we have to help bring them into the conversation and learn from their contributions. So chi miigwech, a big thank you, Derona, for sharing your beautiful story earlier, because it really got my wheels turning in a powerful way.
Lacey and everyone, thank you. Just the richness in this room. My heart is just full, and I think that is very much what I always leave the Toronto Summer Institute with the fullness, because of the people who come and pour into my cup. And as I think about storytelling, and as I think about that's been a very significant part of my contribution to citizen advocacy, is I envision myself as I go out into my community actually capturing, and I will cup my hands usually before people to literally say, I want to hold a piece of what you have, and I want to hold it in my hands long enough that I can pass that along to someone else. And the stories, they keep the mission alive, but they keep the investment of the human connection alive. And it's what we learn from. And this is slightly provocative in citizen advocacy world, because much of what we do is shaped around imagery, particularly enhancing positive imagery. And culturally, in American culture, death is usually associated with negative imagery, and so it is a wee push of the imaging envelope as I begin to think about the people that I've known in my journey over the near 30 years who have shared life together. Perhaps one or both have passed away to begin to tell their stories. So we've got some questions that come up, but I want to continue with the Doug and Joanne story. When she died in 1996, and in Atlanta was the Olympic Games that summer. So it was a huge summer. The state, the nation, right? The Olympic Committee everything had come to Atlanta, and even the preparation of that. If you've ever been in an Olympic city, what happens? The downtown, the structures and statues were erected. Lots of money was poured into making things beautiful, and lots of money was poured into displacing poor people within the city, which we still here in 2001, we're still seeing the harm that brought. And Joanne was a part of that. The group home she lived in was adjacent, was across the street from what was the Olympic Stadium. So there were a lot of things going on, and her becoming sick at that time was just a part of that. And it's just the juxtaposition of imagery of me being able to think about, working in the city and doing citizen advocacy at that time and all that was going on, but having someone in her life who actually slowed all of that down and silenced the noise and drew the attention rightfully back to her is ever etched in my heart. And as I go forth with invitations to people to align themselves with someone, that's some of what I want them to see, that people with disabilities are often going to have this whole circus around them. And we are inviting people, ordinary people, to break into that circus and to stand with and to move with people outside of that. So Doug, by the time he was really getting to know Joanne, he wrote some words after her death to describe some of that, and he's told the story. And I'm privileged that I have handwritten notes and even a note from his wife after her death. But this is just an excerpt from, if I can read it, from their story. Doug says that his visits continued for over 16 years, and he visited weekly to a variety of settings and home providers. I wanted them to know I would keep coming. And at some point, I believe Joanne realized I would keep coming too. And once, after many years, I overheard her say, "Doug won't let them do that to me." And it made me feel good that in a certain way, we were together with each other. In Joanne's last year, she had broken her foot and it just wasn't healing like it should. The need for healing and rehabilitation took her to Crestview Nursing Home in Atlanta, where she found herself among others with much more serious ailments. I was very impressed with the way she began lending her sense of humor and her caring to other residents there. I was not the only one who saw her thinking about herself much less and about others more. We could see that she had a real knack for expressing concern and spreading cheer. Joanne had come a long way in her life. Here, Doug says, here are just a few things I would like to share with you about Joanne. Her birthday was November 4th, and she would help you remember it. I like for mine to be remembered too. She liked a cold soft drink and a cigarette, just like me. She had a strong Christian faith. She was excited about the chance to learn, and she liked to laugh, just like me. She empathized with others and became their friend, just as she did with me. I would like to think that near the end of my life, I can show that it's the strongest and best time of my life, sharing with others and being unselfish and thinking of what's important to them, just like Joanne did in the last moments of her life. That's the legacy that I think we can all learn from. It becomes more poignant, it becomes more powerful because we see the break in discourse in our culture now of thinking that a person of Joanne's background and a person of Doug's background could never come together. But in fact, they've proven that that's exactly what can happen, and it's beautiful. So I had some questions, and I see we're running out of time. So Dave, maybe as a point of reflection, can we just get them all up on the screen?
Derona, I've added 5 more minutes to the session.
I love you. So if you want to reflect on these, like, what did you remember about the things Doug and Joanne shared in common? What did you remember about their differences? And if we've got anybody that wants to chime in with the 30-second response to that, we could do that, right?
Coca-Cola and cigarettes.
We can leave it. Right. Yeah, there you go. That is something. What about anything about their differences?
Banker and displaced person.
And does the story teach us anything about what really matters? They're both gone.
Thanks. Absolutely, I think it does. What really stood out to me is how reciprocal the relationship is. And the differences between them were very man-made and circumstantial to, their experiences. But the similarities and the joys that tied them together were like those human things that everybody loves. If you're a smoker, everyone loves a smoke and a pop, or everyone loves those simple joys that bring you together. And just that ability to step outside of your norm or your worldview to find similarities across, circumstances. It really ties people together in ways that change both of their lives. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a profound lesson.
Lacey, thank you. That is exactly it. And you mentioned the reciprocity stands out. When you think about how human services typically is top-down piece, but this turns the relationship theme around. It's a real relationship of reciprocity, and who benefits? They both benefit, right? They both benefit. They both were the teacher and they both were the helper. But if we have a couple of minutes, I'd love to see if you have thoughts about, if this helps you think about any story that you hold, a story of love and light that you carry that needs to be told.
It's a great question, Derona. I think I spent about the last 15 years training people all over the state and all over the country and the world in many ways. And the stories of connection that I had with people that I was usually in paid supporting relationships with that I carry around now, and how they shaped me to be a better person, is a part of what we need to hear from each other. We need to hear that we've been impacted, changed, and shaped by the people who are in our lives and who are no longer in our lives. Because I can think of 3 people right now who are no longer here with us who have had such a huge impact and been a teacher to me in figuring out how to keep doing what it is I'm drawn to do, and to be humble enough to admit when I also didn't do it very well, and that those stories are all worth sharing and changing with each other.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Derona, yeah, I'm sorry to make this sort of really personal, but you've just made me think that I need to tell my husband's story. And he had a disability, which I think is really important in this story. And he passed away about 5 years ago. But there's a whole legacy of what he taught me, what he taught people around us, and what we taught people. And also probably some things to learn about, maybe how you wouldn't want to do it, if you had it to do again. So I've been kind of tossing it around in my head for a bit, but just listening to you talking makes me think, yeah, well, maybe that is the story of love and light that needs to be told, that I need to tell, that no one else is here. And no one here in Scotland knows him. He's Australian, so people in Western Australia know him, but I've not been around to talk about him there, so maybe something needs to come of that. Yeah, thank you, Derona. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is it. We all have stories of love and light.
Mm.
And it's how we've always learned, right?
Yeah.
But somehow, particularly here in America, we are so what is happening now is all that is happening.
Yeah.
And
right. And there cannot be too many stories. Like there just can't be too many stories, right? Because your story might only have an impact for one person or three people, and yet it could change their world. Or it might have an impact on hundreds or thousands or millions. We don't know when we start out telling the story, but we all have stories to tell, and we all deserve the right to tell them, and we all have the right to read, hear, see, experience others' stories too.
Yeah, what gifts we have. And I think in how we think, even in citizen advocacy, one person carrying one other person's story is of great value, because without you carrying that story, no one else may.
Derona, I'm struck by some of the way that you phrased even the question there, that Doug and Joanne have passed away and each of us will die, but love and light, I think in every religion in the history of the world, are two things that will never die.
I think of how important it is for the oral storytelling as a way for stories to continue on. So the developing a cultural practice of actually telling stories is really an important thing. And writing is also important, but I think it's the way that for millennia stories have been passed on is by one person telling another person or telling a group of people. And I just think that it's a practice that's really important for that love and light to keep finding its way over the eons. So.
Well, I thank each of you. We've got the wrap down here. I really appreciate your joining me and listening. And when you think of Doug and Joanne, I envision them together in heaven now dancing. And just, I want to keep telling the stories. And I hope you will as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's good to see familiar faces and old faces. Just wanted to do a quick introduction of myself again, and then we'll get to Beth, and then Joe will start us off. But my name is Kirk Hinkleman. I live and work in San Diego, California. I'm one of the 3 co-initiators of this Threshold for Change thingy, and I'm happy to be here. So, Beth.
I'm Beth Gallagher, and I also work and live in San Diego and am with LifeWorks and am one of the co-initiators of this Threshold for Change thingy. Joe?
Hi, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. I'm Joe Donofrio, you know, I'm going first because I was the one who probably sent the first email. I looked up the email just to see what I said to Kirk. I think I sent the first one to Kirk. I was squeamish thinking we should do something. And after a month, I was just so over being home and with the girls. And we have twin girls at 12 that we needed to do something. It was chaos. The pandemic created more work than not, even though we were home. We complained about dishes all day long. Kirk and I remember from the first call we had.
Dishes. But
I basically threw out an email to him saying, I think we need to do something. What do you think? Yeah. I came across Terry Chapman's video, and he actually did 3 videos that we used throughout setting the context for our first 3 calls, actually. And the first one was called Reaction to Response, I believe. And like I said in the intro, we were a bit frustrated seeing, you know, the work that we were doing, and we were essential in terms of our work, and seeing how there was not we couldn't rely on the system to really give us any guidance. We were pretty much on our own figuring this stuff out. And it just felt like it was an opportunity for us to look and take a deep dive into really what matters in terms of how do we support the people that we support. And maybe it's time to really look at something differently. As everything closed, lots of businesses closed in terms of that work in our field, that couldn't provide and couldn't be flexible enough to support people in a meaningful manner. And it just seemed like we needed to have a different conversation. So that first reaction, the first video really set the tone for us. I met Terry through the Center of Purposeful Leadership, Art of Convening. We learned how to convene virtual gatherings together. We went on Boundary Waters in Minnesota together, and we became really good friends and along the way. And in his session, he really coined the phrase, which is threshold. And he used and defined kind of where the word threshold came from. And he talks about sort of we're hardwired for reaction, human beings. And so because of that, we really need to slow stuff down and sort of really kind of have an opportunity to kind of find the cracks of what's possible. And to do that, we got to lean into this threshold of two different places: challenges, the pandemic, things going on, things not going the way you want it to go. And then you're in this threshold and you have a way of going either way. You either dive into the disruption and you go that direction, or you look at what the possibilities are and you take a different response. And you take what he talks about in there is just sort of a flowing river that takes you into possibilities and takes you into different opportunities rather than to challenges. And you have to do that to have a clear vision or fresh thinking, and you have to create the conditions for that. So we got together and just sort of listened to the videos. And actually what we did is we put let's watch the video. And our first call was after the video, we watched the video, we started creating our first invitation from that. And that was really kind of it came pretty clear what we needed to do and how we needed to bring people together to think through this from all different parts of the state of California. We made an intentional idea of saying we wanted to do this for California, and we know that California is so big, it's its own country, and that we knew that we needed to bring people from all walks of our system to be able to figure out how to best support this idea and create something. And we also knew that we didn't want to have an end result, that we wanted to create the space for people to figure out what they needed to do with this, but we wanted to use a framework to do that. And so that led us into some basic questions, the three questions that I think we came up with for our first call. What are our allies? Who are our allies? Who are our friends? Who are our teachers? Who are our mentors that need to be on this journey with us in California? I think was one of the questions that we really leaned into. Who is our community? What is that? And then how are we going to be together, and how are we going to interact together, and how are we going to work together? And that's kind of what was our landing. And that kind of created our invitation. And then from there, we started designing some calls that hopefully were going to emerge, and we're still working on that journey. So I think we did 4 to 5 calls. And I'm going to pass it over to Beth, I believe, or is it going to you, Kirk?
Yeah.
Beth.
No, it's to me. So we knew that designing the call was going to be critical. So the way that we went about it was each of us crafted a list of people that we thought would be pertinent. And the list came from a variety of people from across the state, from a variety of different services, a variety of different places, advocates, parents, providers, and within the provider system, all different types of providers, attorneys, people representing state offices, We sent them a well-crafted invitation to see if they would be even interested in it. And in that invitation, in the email holding the invitation, we said, hey, if this intrigues you, give me a call. Let's have a conversation. And out of that, we ended up with about, I don't remember how many off that first part, but each of us gathered about 5 people, 7 people maybe. And then we gave each of those people that we initially gathered a free seat to fill. So they were able to go out and find somebody that we couldn't even think of, right? So they were able to go out and find somebody else to fit in there, that people that we wouldn't even have known existed. So at the first call in June 29th exactly, there was 56 people. And like I said, a cross section of people and a cross section of the state, like Joe just said. The platform was on Zoom. So we had pre-scheduled 4 meetings, the 4th Monday of every month for 4 months, 2-hour call. And basically the platform of the call was a welcome. We did a meditation, like we had said, like Kirk had said earlier in today's, there was a lot of intentional structure to the call, because we knew that a lot of the people that were coming didn't really previously work in this kind of atmosphere where you do meditations before a meeting and that kind of thing. But we wanted to share an example of how this would, be an example of how we were hoping things would go. So a meditation, we did a check-in, we had breakout rooms with a theme to it, based on whatever videos or reading that we had sent them ahead of time. A lot of it based on either Terry Chapman's information or Theory U. And then we would do a checkout, maybe a 1-word checkout or something like that. We also contributed a communication platform called Mighty Networks, which is kind of Facebook-ish, but way cooler. And so that was a place where everybody could be logged in, and we would be able to share, everything, just all emails, a calendar, all the poems that we had, all the images that we had, all the documents that we had. We could share ideas back and forth. It was just really helpful. And so in that, we had asked them to commit to that part. And then also that hopefully that it would end up being, after we were done with the 4 meetings, that they would be able to carry this forward and contribute, creating a hub in their own community and carry it forward. So that was the overall overarching goal. I'm going to pass it on to Kirk.
Great, thanks, Beth. So at the top of this image, you'll see 3 different little statements with the image. That image of the U with the arrow is from the Presencing Institute. It represents Theory U, which is a social technology and a framework for how to walk through change. Certainly not going to spend a few minutes right now explaining it, but part of our call as co-initiators and facilitators of the first half a year or so of convening people was for sure to orient people to what Theory U is, what is as an intention. And in that first image I showed in the 7-minute meeting, can we embody that framework as a means of moving forward? What we know to be true as people who have worked collectively between Joe, Beth, and I, close to probably 80 years within the system in California, is that this sort of framework is not being used. And a reproduction of the same way of thinking and doing is constantly happening, right? So the stop sign is important in the image, and COVID gave us the forced stop for us to say, okay, can we 3 lift up and permeate this energy throughout this call with the hopes that people take what they have been oriented to and learning. Oh, thank God, Linda's adding time. So Joe and Beth talked about the sort of genesis and the design of the call. Over the 4 months, what we did was we framed the call along the trajectory of Theory U as a way of modeling what Theory U looks like. And always with the understanding that it's what when we're in that reproduction downloading loop, all of us, Beth, Joe, and I included in the state of California, can get sucked into the vortex of just doing the same thing over and over and over and complaining about the system from an outside in lens. What's necessary, we believe, and we hold on to, is that we understand that we are the system that we comprise the system, so that we've got to look first and foremost at ourselves. So if you look at these three things, it says you cannot truly understand a system unless you change it. You cannot change a system unless you transform the consciousness it enacts. And you cannot transform this consciousness unless you make the system see and sense itself. So that starts first at an individual level, right? We've got to be able to see ourselves in different ways. So when Beth talks about that cross-section, diversity of intentional invitation to people on the call, it's not just a bunch of directors sitting around a table doing the same old thing. It's directors, neighbors, friends, DRC attorneys, state council people, regional center directors, shedding those labels, dropping that, letting that go, and being still and present with one another in a shared kind of humanity and a shared mission of, let's see if we can do some stuff on the ground in our local communities that we can then share out to the system and see, look what's happening. We were doing it anyway in the wake of the initial month of the pandemic, like Joe described. We had to just do for ourselves. The community came around and did for ourselves. So what we know to be true is that within the service system, with all the rules and regs that are kind of compressed upon us, we know we can do right by people anyway. One person at a time, over and over and over, we can do right by people. So Theory U gives us that framework. And so we rolled that out for people over the first 5 or 6 calls, and now we're in a different phase. But I'll kick it over to Beth to talk about the next sort of portion of our outline here.
So the next part is that.
Excuse me, guys. Before we go, I'm going to apologize. I do have to drop off because I have a training that I'm doing. So I just didn't want you to. Just wanted to thank everybody, and you're in good hands with Beth and Kirk. So,
bye, Joe.
You didn't want to ghost everybody.
Yeah, I didn't want to ghost you. All right,
Joey D.
Be well, guys.
Love you, man.
Thank you so much.
Peace, Joe.
Peace.
So the next part is no rules, no regulations, no money, no boundaries, and that means a lot. If we're going to shift the way we provide services, or the way we show up in community, then rules, regulations, money, and boundaries cannot be a worry. We just need to not even have that in our thoughts as we're moving forward. We need to be able to see clearly and move forward. Joe, Kirk, and I went into this daring to lead, and we asked the participants to do the same. And it was not easy for some people. It was not easy for us. I mean, it was a scary adventure, actually. It's not every day that we call the state of California to a meeting. So it was definitely out of our comfort zone. There's no question about it. And also asking them to think about, systems change while we're not looking at rules, not looking at regulations, not looking at money, and not looking at boundaries. If we could have it any way we want it, how would you want it to look? Let's think about that for a minute and think about how we can solve problems without blaming and without cutting people out. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we really wanted a cross section of people that didn't necessarily think the same. There's definitely like differences of opinions between people that provide residential services and supported living, or people that do supported employment and sheltered day services, and all that kind of stuff. There's just difference of opinion, and all of those people were on the call. So it was fascinating. So that's what we wanted to look at things from a very organic and very pure sense that we can do this. We just need to figure out and let the minutia and the rules and the regulations go by the wayside and figure things out one person at a time, and figure out some stories so that we can tell, kind of like what Derona was saying, stories are absolutely powerful. We need to do that instead of trying to pick up the system and, you know, make it all perfect. We need to figure out one person at a time. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Kirk.
Okay, cool. So just to add on real quick about this no boundaries portion of this image, I think what's really, really far out and super great about Threhold for Change is that we didn't ask permission for anybody. We didn't ask for money. So Beth, LifeWorks down here in San Diego, Beth and I and Joe both provide services that are funded by the state of California. And when you're funded by the government, as you all know, there are all sorts of hoops, you know, rules, documents, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is just Joe, Beth, and I deciding to do something. And it's not attached to money, which means it's not attached to rules. It's not attached to regs, and we can do whatever the hell we want. And that's so freeing. It's so liberating.
It's fantastic.
It's fucking fantastic. So it's so anyway, I just wanted to say that part of one of the elements I love about this is that it really is grassroots. This is just three people who love and care about each other, who have been doing this work for a long damn time, saying let's see if we can start some good trouble, like John Lewis used to say. So if you move down to this image of these three people who are sort of in like a meditative contemplative state, what we're actually after here is an awareness-based collective action. And so what Threhold for Change ends up being, and this is the phase we're in now. So people joined us officially in June for the first call. We walked through 4 or 5 calls through the U. In the initial invitation, at the end said, you know, for the first 4 or 5 months, the time commitment we're asking of you is a 2-hour call once a month, and maybe 15 to 20 minutes of either watching a video or reading some material in between calls. But the real time commitment comes when we're done holding kind of this framework up for you. And when you go, so everyone who's on the Threhold for Change call is representative geographically of the entire state of California, even the Central Valley and the Fresno area, which always gets left out. We've got people from all over. I mean, you can drive from where I'm at now in the state of California 12 hours north and still be in the state of California, which for people on the East Coast, that you're going through 8 or 9 or 10 different states if you do that.
So for you, Lori Kimball, that would be like 19 states.
So
no, it's actually like 7 hours from one end of Maine to the other. So
yeah.
I mean, you're bigger than we are, but you better pick on somebody else from the East Coast.
Anyway, so we wanted to be sure that we grabbed people from all over the state so that we can honestly say that this is a representation of the entire state of California, not just the roles that we've already listed or spoken about. So the idea is for this first 4 or 5 or 6 months that people got to a place of our awareness as a system, that we are aware of who we are and how we affect the greater system at large. And then another element of it was that we were able to set collectively as a Threhold for Change community our intention. And our intention was to kind of take and harness and harvest the energy of these initial calls and bring it into our local communities. And that's where the magic really happens. So the people that were on this Threhold for Change call go off with the energy and the content and the framework and invite others that they know. Like, so we will form a local hub here in San Diego, and San Diego is so big, there probably will be 3 or 4 hubs around a geographical area or around a topic of interest or an issue that needs to be addressed, right? So the Threhold for Change call doesn't go away. It becomes this umbrella of support. And under the Mighty Networks platform that Beth mentioned, people can start to, when you form a hub, say Riva in Fresno forms a hub around self-determination, she'll form that hub under the Threhold for Change umbrella. And Threhold for Change will meet once every 6 months or so as a group so that we can stay connected. But these little hubs will pop up. And this, being from California, is probably not the greatest language, but it really does sink in. It will spread like wildfire. The idea is that these local hubs will spread like wildfire. That was my initial 20-minute timer, but Linda gifted us with 5 more minutes. So our hope is that this momentum goes out and these local hubs start to pop up. I was just on a call, for example, in the supportive role of what Threshold for Change has become, with some people who formed a hub up in the central coast of California, needed a little bit of guidance around the initial stages of inviting people to a local hub around an issue. So I jumped on a Zoom call with them for about 45 minutes to 60 minutes and kind of talked through what they were going through. So what we're hoping is that these intentions that we have set activate our attention, and that with a high quality of attention to these intentions, that this will activate action, which, again, not getting into theory U, but that's the right side of the U, that these local hubs start to walk through hosting people, inviting people to be together in local communities around a shared interest or issue, walk through the U process and prototype something, create something they can do, something they can iterate over and over and over until they land on something, and then harvest those stories. Again, we harvest them through the Threshold for Change Mighty Networks platform in different ways, through writing, through video, through, what is that message saying? We have 2 minutes left. Okay. Or until 2:41. So that it's not just the 50 original people who are on the Threshold for Change call. It becomes, maybe there's 10 by this spring. There are 10 local hubs comprised of 10 to 15 people. Well, there you have another 100 to 150 people. And then that hub shares a story, and there's people in this one region of the state that have been stuck and really haven't been able to figure out how to get momentum going or to pop the clutch, so to speak. Well, they see all these stories of these different hubs and what they're doing, and like, oh yeah, okay. We don't need to overthink this. Let's get people together who actually have it here, right in your gut and in your heart, that would accept an invitation to at least have an initial conversation about something. And then another hub pops up and another hub pops up, and then we can just show it, like, when the friction comes and the tension is prevalent with the people who are on the ground doing for and with people in community to the greater system, we can say, this is what's happening anyway, right? And that can start to really, I think, heat up, so to speak.
The additional hope also is that for people that, may be shy or uncomfortable about starting a hub right now, that maybe in the future when something comes up, that the skills that they've learned around listening and shifting the way that they think around problem solving or around creating new experience out of chaos, frankly, that it will help create a new outcome, that they've learned something different about getting out of the old parameter, getting out of the new, perpetuating the old system. And you can think about how to let go of something that's not working and initiating something that is going to work. So there's a lot of benefits out of it. There's a lot of really great things that are happening, and connecting people from all over the state that never knew each other before. That's another one of the most wonderful benefits, that people are really talking now. And they've talked about how wonderful that is. So
yeah. So we kind of watch you guys around from 6 o'clock down at the bottom of this image around clockwise. And just to end here, that at the roots of this image, we started as co-initiators, and we don't think it would be upheld and possible without this relational foundation that Beth, Joe, and I have had a strong and deep relationship over the years. I don't know that this is held together without that between the three of us, because at the end of the day, as co-initiators, we are sort of like the local hub to the Threshold for Change at large. And so we lean on each other. We understand each other's personal stories. We understand our day in and day out struggles in our own lives. And so when one's bogged down, the other one's able to lift up. And I know I speak for Beth and Joe. Joe's not here. That it's something that is incredibly important when you set out on an endeavor such as this. So anyway, Linda said 1:41 or 2:41 in California. That means 11:41, and my phone says it's 11:41. So I don't know. Anyway,
just saying.
Thank you all for your attention and for being present with us.
Last 30 seconds, she just said.
Last 30 seconds. Quick question, comment, concern? Anybody have to pee?
Yeah.
I'm holding it and waiting.
Am I projecting?
Oh gosh.
Here in New Jersey, that'd be one of those things where we'd hit multiple states. We're only about 4 hours tip to tip. So yeah, we'd be hitting multiple states by doing that 12 hours.
Yeah.
Hey Beth, you looking good?
Hey Garima, right back at you, babe.
Word up, Kirk.
Word up.
Yeah, looking good. Keeping Joe.
But I thought
I'd hang out with you more often, Garima.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I know.
Really happy that y'all have been able to experience the freedom that you have without the boundaries and the rules and the money and everything. That is a effing awesome thing to experience, I know.
Yeah.
A little jealous,
Thanks,
gotta
Kay.
be honest.
Patty is my right in my left hand today. She's gonna be helping me out and chiming in with a couple of stories. Maybe.
Fine.
So
Whatever you
so thank y'all for coming here. I'm just for disclosure, I'm still experimenting with this idea, and concretely, we've been taking this idea of social banking pretty serious. So let me give you kind of a little bit of background to who is the we. So I created this little group of people called the Learning Tree, which basically we share our economy together. So my neighbors are my business partners. And some of them have been to, a couple of the members have been to Indianapolis. And they all live in about 8-block radius around where I live at, 8 to 10 blocks. We all had different roles and we use our own different gifts. Besides my gift, we got Amanda. She's our bookkeeper. Her title is the Executive Spirit. She's probably one of the best executive. She holds a job, 2 jobs too. She's probably one of the best executive admins I ever seen. Wild Style he is the roving illustrator. Some of you met him. I just told a story about him. January York is the animator of the Human Spirit. Her job is to congregate the healers in community. And then we have a few more people we haven't figured out names for. And we do that because we wanted to break colonial models of how institutions are made up. And we're pretty serious. Like Wild Style is Indianapolis mayor, the Indianapolis mayor, he's public enemy #1 on the front page of newspapers. So we're a pretty serious group of people. But basically how we make our money is we have consultant contracts and I divvy it out. When people call me, I give them to another neighbor or friend and they get 40% of their income back. That's how we create our operating budget. So we put in, our operating budget is about $250,000 a year. They all go out on our own to people. So that means we give people money. We have a little grant process where, you don't have to, we don't RFP. We don't believe in that because we have a practice of going and discovering the gifts, and we'll pop up on people and we'll give you a grant with three hang-ups. Is that you can't do what you do alone. This idea that we pull people into collective action. You got to fail at least 3 times because in our neighborhood is a low-income neighborhood. We are penalized for failure. And that's not something I'm just making up. We went to see now the Nobel Prize winners for economics. And that was one of the studies that they said. And then we don't do anything obscene or illegal, but we'll stretch on the legal end because slavery was once legal. So in that, we had used that and we started to realize and sitting down with each other, what is the things we offer? And one of the things Wild Style made it a point, he's like, I didn't believe you, Diamond, that you was finding all these like gifts and talents. And he said to me, but when I'm going around, I know what's missing. And he started taking photographs. And he started calling all of this, whilst I was a hip hop producer. So he got a lot of kids that make videos, you know, and they become street producers too. And so he started posting these things, and his social media campaign was real tight. And he started developing himself as an artist. He didn't know. So he started, that was the first thing that we knew, that stories had power. So that was the first currency that we had recognized that was going together. The other was trust. The thing that I had built up with people is that I had this way of relating with people that is about who they are. And I would share. And so when you came into Learning Tree, you had to give me all your relationships to set up dinners, right? Because I want to meet your friends. And then you can meet my friends. You have access to all my Rolodex anytime you want. And so that became powerful, that we had started building trust. So sometimes things don't even need to be planned out. We already know what step, because we have a practice of building that trust. The other is, of course, the other currency that became important is fiscal currency. People treat people on the margins like they don't know what they're doing with money. It is undignified. Like sending a mom of 10 who has sent 3 kids to college to a class to teach her how to better budget, instead of asking that, you know, we need more money. So that's a currency, fiscal currency, we start dealing with. And all the other currencies affect that. The other currency we wanted to talk about was social capital, right? Did I say that currency, Patty? Already, social capital. Did I do that?
Yeah.
Okay, social capital became important because all the people that had gifts and skills, policy had affected them. That means they didn't have people that treated them. Policy means how we treat our land, right, and how we treat our people. People in our neighborhood didn't get treated with dignified, like they couldn't do anything. So they didn't have the connections of people believing in them. So those are the capitals that have that I'm exploring in the 20 minutes. But there are many more currencies, intangible currencies. So I want to show 3 little things. I want to show a minute video.
Okay, we will show that in 1 second. Are you ready for it right this second?
When you ready.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hit the button and hopefully everything will go well.
The propaganda Wildstyle did in that video was awesome, because he said at the end, previously overlooked. And that went out pretty far. It was interesting, but that was in a response for people taking our land, and other words known as gentrification. So we're right close to downtown. We got a waterway right connected to us. A river is connected to us. We found those doors. We did that, but that project bolstered, that started out with paying like 75 neighbors $150 a piece to do a door. And what interesting that happened, that had moved us into a new project where we just wasn't people sitting on porches with art. And Patty, you can put up the next slide. Was that we captured a corridor. because now those doors are spread out all over the community, and you couldn't deny that creative people live there, right? Rothschild said previously overlooked gift. And I'm only exploring right here this one currency, right? Or it's two currencies together, but mainly story. So people ask us about our doors, and we says, we'll put the doors up if you let us put our gateway. And this highway splits our neighborhood and has been like this since the 50s. And it split the relationships too, the access to people there. And so what we wanted to do is to figure out, you can go to the next, I think there's a couple more. You can see there's always trash. The mural is done now. This was transposed, but it's finished and it looks like this. There's a park around it. That means this is federal and state property owned jointly. So we had no choice. You know, people would say, well, why don't y'all clean it up? And so one of the things that ended up happening is that we said, we'll clean it up, but we want to own the rights to it. So we went and captured it, and the money that would go to corridors, we did, and we chose our own artists. And so we chose a man that is usually underpaid, who's done great murals in there, and we paid him $50,000. And a group of low-income neighbors were able to be the person to pay him give him the highest purse. So you see what's going on is that not only are that people are believing in themselves, but other people on the outside who thought the image of us was that we didn't have anything to offer started to shift. So that meant the city started getting involved. And one of the things we had, you can go to the next one.
To that?
Right there. Yes, that. Is that Wildstyle and I started to realize is that real power is in wealth, right? The land. And people are taking advantage of that, saying it's theirs. And really it's nobody's. And so one of the things we started to do is to plot up, because people knew we had power of story. Wildstyle put in the main chat his article. He wrote that article last year. And then we got the ear of land developers, right? And saying that they didn't want to end up on the front page of Wildstyle's news spread. So people would call us and we said, what do we want? We said we wanted to own land. So we're just now finished, we bought a city block. And what we're doing is to open up the investment, people to be able to buy in, low income people to buy in as little as $100. Some of it will be subsidized, and it's along a waterway that we control. And there's another city block we're in the process of negotiating. Now, mind you, I told you $23,000 per household, right? How does that happen? Well, that happened because the people who are involved that make decisions came to the parties that we were hanging out at, right? And guess who they had to interface? As humans. And one of the rules we have at our parties, don't come talk about your position. You know, we address power right at the door, and, you know, and we shifted that power. And so people would come up, and some of those people were like deputy mayors, and what they did is negotiating. So not only did they help us with the purchase of the land, the agreement with the landowners, but they also gave us some subsidy to do a study to how to build on it, and to pay neighbors to do kind of some equity transfers from city council to support development. So I'm gonna pause there and see if there are any questions.
I'm going to come out of the screen. Is that okay? So people
Yes.
can see you better. Okay. Or as soon as I figure out how to get out.
Cheryl.
I feel like I'm talking to the king. I really do. I'm a huge fan of everything you do, and I'm so appreciative of all of your time. My question is this: with regard to trust capital, and the parties and the gatherings that you've been doing. I've been doing something very, very similar out here in Massachusetts, based a lot on the things that I've learned from you, and I'm really excited. But with regard to trust capital, how much in these parties, other than saying, don't talk about your position, did you do any other sort of facilitation? Did you set up any other parameters or ground rules? Did you foster conversation, or did you just allow it to kind of organically take place? Thank you.
They all were different. The one that Patty filmed that you get to see, and if they come to the larger session later next month, you'll see we went strategic about illustrating gifts. So what we did was a concert. We wanted to make sure that people maintain party. And then we had a basic rule that is kind of known when you come to our house. Don't come talk about your power. So CEOs come, and I don't want people to know you're a CEO of something and lead with that power, right? And Patty, you had anything because you witnessed at that party?
Yeah, the people in the neighborhood really had their gifts on display, and so, for instance, January, I think it was the cook, along with her partner, whose name I don't remember, but they created this brilliant meal, and that's a kind of business they did. January also happens to be a spoken word artist, and she opened the evening with spoken word. There was a local band who came, and then a local singer and songwriter who came and sang some songs. So there was, it was like an embodiment of what it means to, and these are just the people who live in the neighborhood, right? It's not like you're out recruiting people. It's just the people in that several block area. And it was kind of an embodiment of the fact that there's tons of gifts in this neighborhood, and we're all bringing something. It was cool, and there was some conversation too. There was a little bit of facilitated conversation at various points, but it was more a matter of there's a part that we captured at the end where Diamond talked about the fact that we're welcoming our friends. So that it's about friendship.
Can I ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
It's a different one, and so you can take it later or whatever. But my conundrum right now is that I'm not dealing with geographic connectedness as much as I am about lifestyle connectedness, I guess, with lifestyle meaning my community that I'm building are people who are members of the disability community of all different ways and shapes. And so we're kind of scattered all over the place. I'm trying to build community around that and connectedness, but from a geographic standpoint, many of us are nowhere near each other. How do I overcome that?
I'll let someone ask that one, and then maybe something we can have offline. Then I'll answer it. Oh, Jess, were you gonna say something? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I have a question. Like one, it just gets me kind of really excited thinking about the work that Indigenous folks are doing around land back movements. And so we're in the places where we need to find ourselves being resourceful in how we use the resources that we have in the ways you've described to be able to put that pressure on. It's really exciting. My question for you is like, what are sometimes in our communities, like we self-sabotage and we internalize a lot of the oppression, and we're sometimes our own worst enemies. And so I wonder if you have any thoughts or like the mindsets that you had to overcome at a community level to be able to like start to step into the futures that we all know are there for us waiting. So if there's anything that you have to share about that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I'm still struggling with those in my own inner self. And so I think part of that is the best currency is in our community we can find is healers. So you mentioned January. We got a constant check-in. January is one of those people, not only is she a healer, she identifies other healers and makes sure they're up to par for the game, you know. And so, for example, like how this affects policy on our end is that for Black people and brown people in the States, that mental health stuff don't even reach us in not even in scarcity, right? It is undertreated in so many ways because we asking the wrong question. January pulls people together. She pulls lots of with women, but she's been doing this thing with men where she would cook a meal at our house, her and her friends. They'd leave a thing on the table and she would leave us there. And she is cultivating the healers that needed to be there, right? And she didn't just pick people who were broken by it. She had picked warriors in a sense. And so she has this way of doing that. So that currency, that constant currency of healing, thanks, Jess, because that's not one I named, but that is one we use often. I wanted to say about the geographic thing first. I think I wanted to say that this idea of alternative currency is the key to change policy, right? And I say that because from the neighborhood there, for wherever a person stood, there were whilst outstanding, that the governor is now having to figure out how to rewrite policy around housing for people who don't have housing, right? And those currency were direct effect of people trusting Wildstyle's gift, right? So that Wildstyle couldn't get somebody to the table, but Brian Payne, the CEO of Century and the Community Foundation and his board could. And if you're going to be friends with us, you have a responsibility to use that currency. And so those things started to happen. Stories meaning that we're proof positive. So when it comes down, like one of the policies that's being changed in the whole city, not just from our neighborhood, but from all over, is that there are 10 roving listeners, and their job is to use CARES Act money to put into their neighbors' hands and to write a policy of how service should be delivered to humans with dignity. So it's really about the principles you hold with the crew of people you run with, no matter where they're from. A lot of you have been instruments of changing policy in Indianapolis. So Patty Scott, that thing she had, I love the story she did. We show that story all the time. I was equipped with it because I was doing a keynote for a bank. And what it did is got me, now I'm working on banks to change policy. So I'm an advisor for a new bank that's going to put money into hands of people and create access to banks. So it takes a lot of time. Don't do it by yourself. Jack was right. Have 7 people around you that are your people who are caring for you, right? If that was a critical thing in my life 15 years ago. Forget the outcome, right? But the discoveries out of that was powerful. And like people wanted to honor that.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes, Patty.
One of the things we've done playing around in New Jersey is looking at whether it's related to the community we're trying to build or not, just getting to know everybody in everybody's neighborhood, everybody who might be part of this community in their neighborhood, and for no other purpose than to just expand the social capital and find out what gifts are out there and who's out there. And it might not be relevant to anything you're doing right now, but just expanding that currency of social capital is making a big difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the next, and I don't even know the date yet. I'm glad that I got other people in my life that got.
Do you want to know the date?
Yes, you could say it.
It's going to be January 26th. And I can even tell you the time, I think. 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. will be Diamant's follow-up session.
I'm going to explore in depth and give you a chance to explore a little bit about the currencies that are underutilized, or I shouldn't say underutilized, but understated and misrepresented in your communities. And then I'll tell you like explore 5 or 6 main ones and have some stories with it. I might even have a guest, I think, hang out with me.
And how do we access that?
You'll be able to sign up for that on the virtual TSI website whenever it goes up, just like the other sessions.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Peter Block. So I use Peter Block all the time because I know he has a lot of white power, right? And might as well turn it to good. And so I would go bring CEOs. Like, I know people don't take me serious sometimes, so I'll call Peter up and I'll challenge him and say, "Hey, I need you to have breakfast with this dude." And knowing that two white dudes in the room going, "Jack, this is out." And I remember riding over to the car with this guy. He asked me about money, which I don't like when people ask me about money and say, "Should not be making six figures." It's like, I give out millions. So, and so Peter told him that, and he came back and things shifted, right? And so learning how to use a social banker is somebody that uses something to shift policies, um, 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 to deinstitutionalize or I forgot how my daughter say it, but bust the bank open, to say, make all the pennies fall on the ground so everybody has an opportunity to go grab one, right? And so, and it is about sharing, and social bankers in your community already. And so they're usually people that don't have a lot of money, right? Because they give all their money out. They give all their resources, give every connection, and no one ever pays attention to them. Find those people, put them at the head of something, right? Bring them to every meeting, right? Because they're going to make the connection between everything.
I think you have about 1 minute left, just so you know your timing.
I'm done for now.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Nice to see all the faces that I know, and nice to see the faces I don't know as well.
Thanks, Iman. Thanks, Patty. Look forward to the session on the 26th, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a link somewhere, but I can't find it, to January doing her beautiful spoken word that she did that night. I'll see if I can find it if anybody's interested in it. It's really, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I think one of the things you could do, if you want to go to my our Learning Tree, the learnertrees.com, and then our Facebook page, Learning Tree. I'll get those links out to y'all before the next session. I think it would be good to examine some of the little videos. Thank you, Jillian. To become prepared to answer some questions, because there's some heavy topics on there. There's one about Black Wall Street being bombed. There's also one about the police shootings and a party. So I'll see you back in the room.
Welcome back, all. Well, I hope those conversations were as rich for you as the session was that I joined. And because I joined the session holding the story with Derona, we all bought about 5 or 6 more minutes, because it was clear that we were not going to be done with even that breakout conversation. And I just wanted to create a little bit of space here for a bit of a harvest and invite people to use the chat as if it was a journal. And please share something that's bubbling up for you now, something that maybe you're carrying forward or thinking about from this session, something that struck you. I know we were all in 3 different spaces, but we'd love to get just a few minutes of a harvest and then see if there's anybody who also at the same time would like to speak into the whole gathering. Have about 5 minutes for that, but really invite people to use the chat. We'll also share the edited chat. Thanks for these contributions. Is there anyone who's called to speak to the whole? If you are, I'm going to invite you to just unmute yourself and
Hi, it's Cheryl Chan. So I am called to speak because I just had this mind-blowing session with Damon and the group that I was with. And I came today in large part because I'm in the middle of, among many different things I get myself into trouble for. About a year and a half ago, I started something called Community Builders of Massachusetts, and I just started creating these gatherings. I called them gatherings, and I started shaping them into intentional asset mapping kind of experiences. And we would start each one off in somebody's house. This was pre-COVID. And each time I asked everybody to please bring something to eat, but don't fix it. And I asked everybody to come, and somebody would host it, and we would all just start a gathering in their kitchen, making a meal together, because that brings us all together in such a lovely way, no matter who we are. Fast forward, I've done many of these. We now have multiple chapters across Massachusetts. I've been in a little bit of a stuck place, a lot of it having to do with COVID, but I've rekindled this in the last 4 months or so, and now we're continuing on our journey, and we're bringing more things into our conversations, and we're about to invest in Time Bank, a Time Bank tool, literally the Time Bank of USA. There's multiple ones all over the world, I think, but I'm really excited. But this conversation brought me to the next level of where I want to go in terms of the conversation with these chapters, so to speak, with these groups of folks who are just so thirsty to get this done and to learn about each other and to fill in gaps for each other's lives. And so I just learned about other currencies that I hadn't thought of. And they include stories and trust and social capital. And of course, fiscal currencies are in there. And I want to stay here, but I've got all this stuff, and I almost want to log off and go racing over to these people that I've gathered over the past year and a half and be like, guess what? Now I've got even more we can talk about. So I'm so appreciative, because as I expected, TSI has brought me some wonderful new energy. So I'm appreciative of that, and I wanted to share that.
Thanks, Cheryl. Jack, as you look at the chat, are there a couple that, if you unmute yourself, just pick a couple of points to read out, and I'm going to take just a moment to post the upcoming sessions, and we'll talk about that.
From Sheldon, it's time to continue to seek out and share our own stories of connection. They are what connect us all. I'm trying to go quickly here. Brilliant reminder of how rich our communities and citizens really are if we explore them through the glasses of inclusion. Diamond takes social capital, something I have been interested in for years, to a whole new level. So many messages and reminders. Respond, reciprocity, invest in relationships. Disruptors create innovators. When we have independence without rules, regulations, or money, there is liberation, inspiring others to grow and lead. And lastly, finding gifts that are not banked.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really will. We will follow up with a link after this session for feedback to your hosts, and we'll share the edited chat so that we can all reflect on the kinds of things that people are thinking about and what's bubbling up for them. And we want to share that with that, each of the presenters today for the 3 sessions have been generous enough to offer a follow-up breakout session that there'll be registration open for those sessions probably by the end of the weekend. we'll be sure to send you all a note so that you know that that's happened and the registration is open. On January 6th from 2 to 4, Diamond will deepen and continue the conversation about social capital and intangible currencies, and Kirk Hinkleman and Joe Donofrio and Beth Gallagher on February 4th from 1 to 3, and I'm using East Coast times, so honoring our California friends. It is 10 to noon on the Pacific Coast, and it will be 1 to 4, 1 to 3 for us in Eastern Standard Time, and our friends in Scotland and Germany will be joining us from an evening session, I hope. And on February 8th, Derona will be having another conversation around holding the story, and so we'll have a chance to dig deep into that as well. And the next virtual Summer Institute is on the second Tuesday, as the remaining virtual Summer Institutes will be. Even if you don't see the registration, mark your calendars, because the virtual Summer Institute will be on the second Thursday afternoon of the month from 1 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. And the next virtual Summer Institute will be February 11th. Very likely a World Cafe conversation. And the next round of Ideas That Matter will be in March. Really grateful. Go ahead, Jack.
This has been an amazing introduction to 2021. It would be very easy to leap into the great sinkhole of other issues. And this is deep therapy on what really matters. And it's amazing because it really is in our individual and collective capacities to do stuff. Cheryl, your point that you're ready to go out and do more now because you got reminded about, and it was always there. It's not that this got invented today. It's always been there, but we've forgotten how to notice. So all around us, we're surrounded by gifts and capacities, intangible currencies, and the stories that surround us are incredible and full of power and heart and love and trust. So the invitation is to get into good trouble and drop all those bloody boundaries so that we can be liberated and invent the futures we want. And so with that,
Jack, I'm inviting everyone to enter a closing word in the chat.
Yep.
And you have some music that you want to play while folks read that?
I'm just going to put a little music up while you're chatting, and we hope to see you at the various follow-up sessions and whenever and wherever. Hopefully over a coffee as well, but see you soon.
Miigwech, have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Miigwech. Thank you.
Happy New Year, one and all.